Alpine Rally of 1954, the 17th Criterion des Alpes, was planned to be the toughest and most grueling of this historic series of events. Divided into 4 main stages to be covered in over 2,200 miles, led over the mountains of France, Italy, Austria, Germany and Switzerland, to end, as it began, by the sun-drenched shores of the Mediterranean. The 82 starters, assembled by the harbour at Marseille, included the pick of Europe's long-distance competition drivers, men and women fully aware of the hazards and tribulations to which they and their machines would be put in the next 5 days, yet eager to join the struggle for the high prestige, which is the principal reward of success on the Alpine. Afternoon sunshine in Provence, fast tree-lined roads, ahead the mountains. This was the prelude. But the coveted Coupe des Alpes is reserved for drivers who complete the course without penalty for lateness on the rigorous schedule. And the first stage of nearly 700 miles in 20 hours, northwards and east to Saint-Moritz, lay across cruel country. As the rally entered its first night, it was already clear that the weather was to play a strong hand against organizers and competitors alike. Dawn found the drivers clear of the passes of France's southeastern frontier. The Alos, Vars and Izoard had been crossed, but the Italian Alps were wearing their winter dress, and conditions like these were more suitable to the January run to Monte Carlo than the far higher average speeds demanded for the Alpine in July. The 2 smallest classes for 750 and 1000cc cars were an all-French affair for Renault and Panhard. And with roads completely icebound, the smallest cars in the event were favored by their lower target average speeds. But as the cavalcade approached Saint-Moritz from a course which had been modified to include the pass of Viviani, the field had already thinned out a lot. Many were penalized, and the struggle for supremacy began to take on its shape. The battle for the team prize, as tough a proposition as anything on the Alpine, was already thinned down to 3 British teams: the Sunbeam Alpines, the Triumph TR2s, and the Daimlers of Corbishley, Bolton and Sorledge. Derek Hard was playing a lone hand for Morgan. The Jaguars were no strangers to the rally. But here's a newcomer to the Alps, the Standard 10, hard driven by a gentleman of the press. So, after 20 hours against the mountains, the weather and the clock, the cavalcade checks in at Saint-Moritz. Of the 82 starters, only 32 have defeated the schedule and escaped penalty on the first stage, and 20 are missing. Triumph test driver Ken Richardson has lost 2 minutes to a puncture, but the team is still well placed. Monte Carlo Victor Gatsonides has retained a clean sheet so far, sharing the ride with a fellow Dutchman, Slotemacher. But the rally is still in its early days. The international competition will be fiercer yet. And Stuart Blodgett, who won his Alpine ride in an American competition, may well be wondering about his choice of a reward as the excitement mounts and the mountain roads and the weather take their toll. Every minute of the Alpine is scheduled against the clock, and even the move from control to the overnight car park is governed to ensure no servicing to overworked machines except in time won against the overall average speeds on the road. Experience, as well as skill and courage at the wheel, are at a premium on the Alpine. Driver and co-driver must be in the exceptional class to survive even the first stage. Unless the car matches the qualities of the crew, the Alpine is an impossibility. And as the surviving machines are guarded overnight in the sealed car park at St. Moritz, the tired drivers snatch what rest they can. From St. Moritz to Cortina via Munich, a fantastic right-hand circuit across 4 frontiers and 6 major passes above 7,000 feet. Such was the second stage of the Alpine of 1954. But as the cavalcade climbed the pass of Bernina from St. Moritz, the drivers comforted themselves with the thought that conditions could scarcely be worse at any point on the 500 miles which lay ahead. But even the organizers of the Alpine are forced to give best to an avalanche. And at the start of Europe's highest pass, the Stelvio, came an unscheduled halt in the proceedings. Rerouted to avoid the roadblock, the cars continued to press northwards towards the Austrian frontier, and the ill wind of the avalanche had at least afforded the drivers an unexpected 90 minutes rest from the perils of the icebound mountain road. The Triumph team remained intact, and although Richardson and Catt were penalized, all were well aware that the game was by no means played out yet. The struggle for minutes in the Alps is probably the most rigorous test which driver and car can undergo, and the constant strain on gearbox, transmission and brakes is as unending as the serpentine roads themselves. This was the new Triumph's first attempt upon the Alpine, and as the field thinned out with almost every pass, competitors realized the strength of the newcomer's challenge. The roads are, of course, open to normal traffic on most of the route, and a blind corner can conceal almost any hazard, or even a stop for lunch. Snow in the heights, avalanches on the slopes, and in the valleys, floods. A further detour near the Austrian frontier called for more map reading. But northward still, towards Munich. Still, the weather did its worst, and in torrential rain, the Triumph team succeeded there in the high-speed test where many failed to reach their target. But as the route turned south again towards the mountains, the going became more hazardous with every mile. Floods closed the approach roads to the Großglockner. Out came the organizers' maps again, and an alternative course via the Aachen and Brenner passes was plotted on the spot. Back into Italy ran the road. And at Cortina in the Dolomites ended the second stage, and the hopes of all but 21 drivers for a Coupe des Alpes. The circuit of the Dolomites, 188 miles of road which climbs and dives through 7,000 feet repeatedly. This was the course for the third stage of the 1954 Alpine. The Dolomites are the garden of the Alps, and for the first time the weather behaved more reasonably. The road climbs through the flower-decked meadows above Cortina d'Ampezzo to cross the passes of Falzarego and Pordoi. But against a time schedule calling for average speeds of up to 47 miles an hour, there's little time for competitors to concentrate too much upon the beauties of the Alps. But here at least the road is closed to non-competitors, and that means you. And the clerk of the course tackles the task with true Italian enthusiasm. In the 750 class, the little cars had to average 40.3 miles an hour over the circuit to escape penalty. For the 1-litre cars, the average was 41. The 1300s had to make a half a mile per hour more, and in this class, the new Austrian Denzel, in the hands of its builder-designer, was going great guns against the standard Porsche opposition. Target speed for the 1600cc class was no less than 43.5 miles an hour, and the initial climb of the pass of Pordoi was separately timed for bonus marks. Still, the Triumph team pressed on with consecutive numbers running line ahead. Dutchman Gatsonides retained his clean sheet, but one mistake, one falter in the power output of the overworked engine on this stage, and bang would go all hope of success. American visitor Blodgett forces on, though collision with a crashed competitor will soon end his gallant first attempt. Veteran alpinists Peter Collins and George Hartwell lead Sheila Van Dam, striving for her second consecutive ladies' prize. But could this be a short-sighted navigator looking for the road? So to a welcome sign for all concerned, for although of the surviving cars, only one more clean sheet went by the board on the circuit of the Dolomites, that 190 miles took the edge off many an engine. The fourth and final section was probably the worst of all. From Cortina back to the finish at Cannes, 884 miles in 28 hours of driving without rest. The road ahead to some extent unknown because of Detours, but involving still 9 major passes, 2 of them timed ascents. The normal, leisurely pace of mountain life forms a striking contrast with the hectic chase of the rally. Any straight must be taken with foot hard on the boards. And even in the villages, there can be no relaxation of the constant effort. is the Stelvio, traditional speed hill climb on the Alpine, bypassed on the outward course, but open now for tired cars and drivers to pit themselves against the watch. The climb to over 9,000 feet in 8 miles involved more than 50 of the tight hairpins colloquially known as lacets, concrete-covered bootlaces in this case, and even more slippery under the influence of melted snow than the treacherous loose surface of the straights and their inevitable dust. And the Stelvio took its toll. 4 more cars failed there. So down to the lowlands once again, to the Bormio control, and then the comparatively easy stretch to Lake Como, where cars still capable of making any speed afforded time for tired crews to snatch a meal in the late afternoon. Westwards now to the Franco-Italian frontier, where officials on both sides saved precious minutes by their friendly cooperation. The little St. Bernard was tackled in the dark, then onto the Iserin, and still there were hundreds of miles of mountain between the competitors and their journey's end. Col du Glandon, Croix de Fer, Col du Telegraphe, with its tight hairpins in quick succession, on through Valois to the Galibier, pass after pass in a heart-breaking succession of continuous effort. Now there were less than 40 survivors on the road, and the majority of them were in various degrees of trouble. Moss and Cuts were the sole unpenalized survivors of their team. Murray Frame had been beaten by 1/5 of 1 second. Dutchman, Cat and Tack were 30 points adrift, leaving Gatsonides as Holland's hope for a Coupe des Alpes. Richardson was struggling with further misfortune, a broken rear spring, for Lady Luck plays a strong hand in the Alpine in a game which is liable to be rough. American driver Atkins had dropped this one 20 feet down a ravine. It looks it. All along the route, landslides made shocking road surfaces worse still, and to continue at all called for high courage from the crews. Detours was impassable, but the Cayole led to the Col de Var, the Var to Briançon, Briançon to the Col de Valby, and on to the Col de Blain. By now, the drivers had been 22 hours without rest on this final stage. But still, one slip of concentration could spell complete disaster at the speeds they must maintain. But as the cars swept down on the final run from the mountains to grass and to the coast, the weather was left behind, and the Mediterranean at Cannes smiled its traditional welcome to exhausted crews. Of 82 starters, only 37 checked in here, and of these, 18 were British. But still, the final test lay between drivers and their rest. A simple acceleration braking test, this is no major hazard at normal times. But at the conclusion of such a run, with bonus marks in the balance, it called for the last ounce of effort from man and machine alike. Determined to beat his luck, Ken Richardson made second fastest time of any car, regardless of class. Yes, even including him. The battered Porsches survived to take first two places in their class, and the courage of Atkins was rewarded by second place to the American. Cat and Tack had fought their way through to complete the Triumph team. To Richardson and Heathcote, fourth place in the class. And to Gatsonides and Slaughtermarker, a Coupe des Alpes and second place in the class. The Triumph TR2s, on their first outing in the Alpine, had won two of its most coveted awards. And as the honours of the Alpine of 1954 were presented to triumphant competitors, a team from Holland and Britain, with a British car, had shown once again that achievement in the realm of motorsport knows no frontier.